Good evening, and welcome to another Black Mental Health is Black Health. Tonight, we will talk about Project 2025. Some people have heard of it, some people have read about it, some people have no clue. Well, tonight, we're all about education, so we're here to talk about and hopefully enlighten you just a little more. I have some awesome guests who, if you've been here, they'll get to introduce themselves. But first, we've got to breathe in. And honey, talking about Project 25, we're going to need some deep breaths to decompress before we hear this. So let's do it. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. One more. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Just some deep breaths to get us started. So we are going to jump right in. I have two amazing guests, Brandon Mack and PK McCary. So I'm going to let you introduce yourselves, and I'm going to switch it up. Mama PK's been here a couple of times. So, Brandon, you're a newbie on the show. So, I'm going to let you go first. Tell us who you are and something cool about yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me here. And hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Mack. I am what I like to call an activist, organizer, all around angelic troublemaker. I do activism centered around racial justice, LGBTQ plus rights, and education. And I'm also the founder and owner of my own consulting firm, BMAC Strategies, where we practice unapologetic equity in all areas of life. So I work with people on the college admission process, equity, inclusion, and diversity, and training and education facilitation services. So happy to be here.
A busy person. PK McCary, tell us who you are and something cool about yourself.
Something cool about myself. Oh
Yeah.
wow. I'm PK McCary, Mama PK to anybody under the age of 50, and I'm a what I call a griot and a peace activist, and my work centers around building cultures of peace, justice, and healing, and knowing that the world needs a lot of peace, justice, and healing. I've gone to 27 countries, is probably the one thing that is incredible. I'll use that word. It's an um, incredible experiences, being able to see the world from
Mm-hmm.
um, close up and personal.
Awesome. We are going to jump right in and talk about Project 2025. So, Brandon, can you give us just a quick definition? Not that that's really possible to say quick, but what is Project 25?
And that is true that this is going to be as quick as it can be because for those who do not know, Project 2025 is actually a 922-page manifesto that has been produced by the conservative part of politics, mainly the Heritage Foundation. And it really is an outline and a plan to eliminate all sorts of advances that have specifically benefited historically marginalized communities. So this would be the elimination of gains that we, especially as Black and Brown people, have seen in education, healthcare, all sorts of different parts of our lives, and all sorts of different rights. So that's a very quick synopsis of what Project 2025 is. It has been around longer than 2025, just so everyone knows. It actually dates all the way back to the Reagan administration, and it's a plot for in the event that a conservative person gets into the office of the presidency, what to do in order to roll back all of those advances.
So true. And I will point out the first one was rolled out, as you said, under the Reagan administration in 1973. Now, at that time, President Reagan partnered with the Heritage Foundation or was influenced by them, and but 2/3 of their plan was enacted under the Reagan administration. So these different projects are updated over time,
Mhm,
and each one becomes more dangerous.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, no, I'll take it back. It was more than 1/3. I think it was like 2/3 of it was under Ronald Reagan and under the plan at the time was enacted. So it's something we need to really look at. It's
mhm.
been around for a long time, and under this, it's dangerous. That
Very
there's
much so.
a word in terms of what it will do. Um, PK, we're going to talk about some of the key areas. Can you list for us and just kind of tell us what are some of the key areas um, in Project 2025?
Well, there are definitely four pillars. And interestingly enough, I just saw a video podcast with Oral Roberts' son, who talked about Project 2025 as something that was part of the evangelical movement.
Hmm.
And, Oral Roberts was the man that said that he would have to commit suicide if you didn't give him money. But um, there was a young African American woman, they were having this conversation together. So there are four pillars, and these pillars are, you can see just kind of how evangelical they really are. Um, their first pillar is dismantling the administrative state, reducing the size and power of federal bureaucracy, reforming the federal workforce. And I don't know if any people who are listening to some of the pundits, um, this federal workforce would be everybody that's working, they'll replace them. And we're talking about thousands of people that only uh, are loyal to this Heritage Foundation manifesto. They want to restore a constitutional government. And just like Brandon was saying, rolling back legal precedents and policies that they view as inconsistent with a strict interpretation of the Constitution. And last pillar, building a national defense and foreign policy rooted in America first. But we're talking about nationalism. We're talking about it's not for everyone, and
Mhm,
it's purposely not for everyone.
Mm. Now, I want to dive into those a little deeper.
mhm,
Overview. Now, we're going to look at it because people need to understand. So, what does that mean?
mhm.
They want to do this policy deals a lot with they call it justice and equity. I call it inequity.
Very much so.
But they're
Right.
pointing. What do you have to? What are your thoughts, Brandon, about the whole? What they're looking at is the equity and justice that they want to perpetuate.
What they're trying to perpetuate is a recentering of society being back to the pale, male, and stale, as I like to call it, meaning that we're going back to old white men being centered first and foremost. So, for example, when they say dismantling the administrative state, what they're talking about is eliminating the Department of Education. If they eliminate the Department of Education, that means that they eliminate Title I funding. They eliminate what they call area studies. So, African American studies, Hispanic Latino studies, anything that is not centered on the old white male paradigm is eliminated now from education, both at the K through 12 level, but also in the higher education level. So what we're seeing, for example, with the tax on DEI right now, both in education and in hiring, all of that would be eliminated. They're also even talking about eliminating that in healthcare. So, for example, one of the pillars of eliminating the administrative state would be eliminating the Affordable Care Act. So I know that this is centered on mental health. So for all of you who are getting your health services, including your mental health through the Affordable Care Act, if Project 2025 is put in, it would eliminate that. So therefore, who would have access to quality health care? Only those individuals who have the wealth and the power and already access to it. So that's the reason for why we have to care, is because all these different policies, procedures that have been used to make sure that we all get access and equity would be eliminated and go back to the original. Because let's all remember, in the Constitution, we are not defined in the Constitution. If we
Mhm.
go back to an original state of the Constitution, we would only be three-fifths of people, if that.
Yeah. Ooh. And it's in place. It's in place. I will say this in terms of education, for instance, in Houston, and there are probably others in the country. The Houston
Florida.
district has been taken over by the state, and one of
Yes.
the things in Project 2025 is starting military academies, and they actually have a school in a predominantly black neighborhood in Houston that is a military academy. So when you look,
Yes.
looking at how they're changing education, that's definitely part of it. It's a start. So as I said, under Reagan, 2/3 of the heritage plan was put in place, and this is put in place without it being known. Now it's like, oh, we're bold. We're putting it out there, and everybody can know what we're going to do. It's not in secret. So since it's not in secret, we have to deal with it.
Mhm.
One of the pillars was dismantling the administrative state. PK, could you elaborate on what that would look like?
Like a sci-fi movie. I mean, this is Orwell was
Hmm.
Orwellian. I don't think that people believe this because it does seem like a movie, and there are aspects of it that, for me, the word is evil.
I can agree. Hmm.
And I've written a book, well, called Hindsight 2020, and it's set in uh, 1967 when I was 14. That was when integration started in Texas. And there are 2 points I want to make. The first thing is there's never been integration because they never desegregated. And they were making all the decisions about what it would look like. Um, it started off with they had a few people of color in the new schools that were being built. And uh, there was also a lot of white flight who
Mhm.
decided they weren't going to school with us. And I realized that when you think about educating children, you have to care about them. You have to see them as valuable. We were not valuable and we were not cared about. We were not nurtured by them. It was almost like a military state. And so I think that it is the more things change, the more they stay the same. No ands if buts about it. If they could, they'd take us back, corral us, and put us back into slavery. And in some ways, they are doing that with the criminal justice system. This is not something to play with. And one of the hardest aspects of this is that they've been planning for a long time, and we haven't been um, really paying attention because in an oppressive and colonizing um, environment, you tend to, and I can't think of what the word is, but you know how somebody's been captured and then they're in love with their captors. These are some of the problems that, from a mental perspective, for me, is it's to diminish who we are. No compassion, no empathy, none of that is in this document. And it's telling us that they don't care about us.
If if
Go
I could
right.
add to
I keep chopping at the bit. I'm gonna let you in.
if I could just add to that, especially because you brought up criminal justice, that's actually another really essential pillar of Project 2025 in terms of some of the initiatives that they propose include increasing policing and increasing incarceration. So they actually want to build more prisons, increase more police, and we already know that police already have an anti-blackness problem. So when you are adding more policing, more incarceration centers, who is that going to disproportionately impact? It's going to impact us as Black people and as also historically marginalized people. So that's another reason for why we have got to pay attention to this, because while they may not be saying that, that is definitely a critical part of this particular project, is increasing the amount of money that would go to police organizations, but also it calls for the reduce in funding of community alternatives. So all the other alternatives related to like community policing, related to diversion programs, those things would be eliminated based off of Project 2025 as well. And as you mentioned, it is kind of designed to make us, in a sense, feel that Stockholm syndrome, that, oh, this is better, or this is a better alternative, when it's like, no, what you're doing is you're trying to reduce me from the equation. And then if I'm not in the equation, then I don't have to be considered at all.
Yes. And I want to piggyback on that. And when you were saying, you were stating in the past tense that they didn't care about us. That's not past tense. That's present.
Well, that's true.
Look at our education system, and I'm not saying every teacher, but the system itself does not care. There are wonderful teachers and educators out there who are fighting the odds, and they care and they're loved. They're wonderful, even administrators. But as a whole, the system is against education. And when you look at this project 2025, it helps perpetuate that. I know we're talking a lot about education because it's so important. But even looking at, like, one of the things you were saying was reforming the federal workforce. Now think about it. When If you can just come in and fire anyone who may not be loyal to you, a lot of people that look like us are in the federal government system.
Hmm.
Who do you think might be impacted? We're just gonna get rid of you because. So everybody basically becomes an at-will employee.
Correct.
What are you guys' thoughts about that particular pillar, reforming the workforce, the federal workforce?
Well, they've really already started doing that,
Mhm.
especially when Trump got in office.
Hmm.
And there's a young man that I taught Sunday school. His name is Yubi. Yubi is a doctor, and he and other doctors have become part of the um, medical environment of those with HIV.
Mhm.
And under Obama, they were given uh, offices and money. That's the first thing, one of the first things that um, Trump First, he put them in the basement. He took them out of their offices. He put them in the basement, and he took their funding. They wrote a piece in the Washington Post and in the New York Times about it, and got up and walked out because they knew they couldn't be a part of
Mhm.
that, and they were not going to be cowed and insulted because they knew this work was too important. And that what is what they want. They want to erase what has been done. And we're like sitting ducks because HIV is not. Um, I don't care about them. That's what happens to people who are uh, in the LGBTQ community. That is, they they basically take away the humanity
Mhm.
of our environment and who we are. I think that that's why, in some ways, this um, thing about joy and change and that we're going to all work together seems wonderful. It seems wonderful, but the underpinnings of how long they've been doing this
Mhm.
is hard to fathom, but mentally, it is one of the, there are just moments sometimes when I'm working and writing and um, addressing an issue that I have to stop, not just only and take deep breaths, but to go ahead and cry and to
Mhm.
grieve well so that I can release some of that. At least I have some of those tools. Not only do I have friend therapists for friends, my friends are therapists, and we have a job to do. We have to uh, counter this movement that is entrenched in white supremacy.
Brandon, thank you. What are your thoughts on this?
So, my particular thoughts are very similar in the fact that if you eliminate federal jobs, look first and foremost at currently the makeup of who makes up a big part of the federal workforce. The federal workforce is largely made up of African Americans, Hispanic Americans, other individuals who tend to be marginalized, especially in the fact that they tend to stay in those jobs for a very long time. So then that's going to have an economic impact on our families in the fact that if those jobs are eliminated, what are they then being replaced by? So we have to think about that in terms of the fact that if we see the reforming of the federal workforce, first and foremost, is taking away our jobs. But then it's also taking away those perspectives on services. So if you think about the reason for why it is so imperative that we're a part of those particular systems, is because we bring all of ourselves into any job that we're in. So that means we're going to bring the attentiveness to our issues when we're in those positions. But if we're not there, then we're not attended to. So to me, this once again goes back to the bigger part of the project, right? The bigger part of the project of Project 2025 is once again the recentering of old white men and the recentering of whiteness. So we got to think about that with every single one of these pillars, is that they're trying to eliminate us and eliminate what we rightly should be entitled to, and also our rightful place in any number of these systems.
So true. And when you talk about the recentering, what was that? Pale, male, and stale.
Pale, male, and stale.
And I love that because it is so true, and that is what they want. Because if you think about it, even white women are not included in this. It truly is pale, male, and stale, old white males, and they want to hold on, and it's interesting that so and Trump embodies that.
Exactly.
he is the prototype for that. So you can see why, um, when you look at him, you would see Project 2025 because that's what it's designed for. PK, looks like you're ready
Exactly.
to jump in to say something. Were you?
Well, I mean, we're looking at what's at stake, civil rights and anti-discrimination protections, educational equity,
Mhm.
LGBTQ plus rights, disability rights, environmental regulations. We're not going to have. Let's really look at this, um, including healthcare access. We're talking about a climate movement that will be dismantled. The things that um, I remember when I worked for Browning Ferris Industries, they did a study about landfills. And what they said was landfills, all you have to do is put it in the earth and rotate it, and it will be clean. Well, there are neighborhoods where cancer is,
Mhm.
well, not just cancer, um, all health problems that affect a whole community living in that. Bad water. Um, I mean, right now they have prisons and no air conditions, not even fans somewhere. This will be a military state. All of this goes away. All of this goes away. And you think they can't do it is part of what is scaring me so much, because there are people who look like me who think this is going to be a great idea. One man said we should be slaves again, and he would like to own slaves, which means that he really has a mental issue about his own self worth. That's self hate.
It is. We think, and I just want to add this as we begin to wind down. We have to think this will also impact voting rights. So,
Mhm.
Project 20,
Already affecting.
you look
Already.
at things that, yes, things that are already happening to change voting rights. And we look at the big picture, but then the little picture of things that are happening when you, in cities where you change the amount of polling places and you take polling places out of marginalized communities. And so you have less places to go. And so we look at the big things they're doing. We've got to look, all over at what's going on. So tonight was just a quick overview of a teaser, really, into what Project 2025 is.
Mhm.
Hopefully, we've given you just a tease to make you think, I've got to know more about this. This is a plan that is in place. It's a written manifesto. You can get it online, but understand the Heritage Foundation has had plans in place since 1973.
Mhm.
This plan was under President Reagan, and 66% of it took place under him.
Mhm.
If Trump would be elected, it will probably be 100% of their plan. Their plan has always been to take back, and that take back means to push us under.
Mhm.
Um, so I
Make America great again.
right. And when was it great? If you
When
think
was it great?
50,
Right.
well, that wasn't great for us. I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds to say one final comment.
I
Sure.
think, oh, go ahead, Brent.
So my final comment would be to everyone to continue to look into Project 2025. There are amazing podcasts out there, such as Joy Reid's podcast that breaks it down. So there are many resources, but learn about this, talk about this with your fellow friends and family, because we all need to be in the know, and then get out there and vote. This is an existential threat to democracy, and we need to use all of our tools to fight against that.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that we can do, and especially those of us who have websites like Brandon and yourself, that there needs to be a definite um, acknowledgement that this is going to happen and you're against it. Call it out. You have to call it out. Don't put on blinders. And what you don't know, go learn. It's all out there for you to see. Along with Joy Reid, there's Angela Rye and her co-host their podcast. So
Native Land.
yes,
Yeah.
So
well, thank you
there
both.
we go.
Thank you both for coming. We always end with a call to action, and our call to action tonight is be educated on all things politics. Now we don't have an excuse. There is the internet. So be educated. Second call to action, we don't be afraid. Some people want to bury their head in the sand. Don't be afraid. And finally, my last call to action is always and probably will always be vote, vote, vote. Be an educated voter. Don't just vote at the top of the ballot, vote all the way down. So thanks for joining us tonight. And thank you, my two guests, for joining me. And I am Bronwyn Lucas, Miss B, the Black Couch Therapist, here to help you become a better you. See you next week.